Now to Canada, where even the prince of performative caring, the leftist of left leaders, Justin Trudeau, he's even admitted a truth that Anthony Albanese cannot bring himself to admit.
Over the past few years, we've seen a massive spike in temporary immigration, whether it's temporary foreign workers or whether it's international students in particular that have grown at a rate far beyond what Canada has been able to absorb. Increasingly, more and more businesses relying on temporary foreign workers in a way that's driving down wages in some sectors.
Kosha, he also explained that the huge numbers of migrants coming in are putting pressure on communities, particularly in terms of housing. It's stating the obvious, and yet we don't seem to acknowledge these inconvenient facts here in Australia.
It is interesting if we could have a wall of all these Johnny-come-latelys who are so far behind the curve, and now they're saying it. It's Trudeau, which I never would have expected. It's Mayor Eric Adams in New York, Governor Pritzker of Chicago, all these places that were panaceas of immigration, legal, illegal, every which kind. Yeah. Now when it's coming to their doorstep, they're waking up. Some would say, 20 years too late, because it's very difficult to unscramble the egg once people come in there. And you're quite right. Here, you're not seeing that discussion at all. The cynical people out there might say that this is, again, window dressing, and Trudeau is saying it because the issue is striking home much, much more now with the citizenry. But do they really believe it? Are they really going to change policy to do it? The cynical side of me would say I'll wait and see if that happens.
Well, they do have enormous numbers going to Canada on a permanent basis. I think it's over 400,000 a year, so you can understand why there's concerns. Now, Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, has had a big week. Monday was a good day. He brought in new hate crime laws that severely restrict free speech. Look how happy he is with himself. But plot twist, Yousaf is now sad because he's the most reported for committing hate crimes. Yes, those rants about white people have come back to haunt him.
The most senior positions in Scotland are filled almost exclusively by those who are white. Take my portfolio alone. The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every Prison Governor, white. And not just Justice, the Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white. That is not good enough.
A Police Scotland spokesperson said, "We have received a number of complaints in relation to a speech in the Scottish Parliament on June 10, 2020. And we just heard a bit of that speech. He's got himself into a world of trouble. And I think this is just delicious because these Orwellian types, these anti-free speech types, never think the laws that they implement will be used against them. But right now, that's precisely what's happening in Scotland."
Such a great word, delicious. We talk every week, it seems, that the battle of free speech is the battle of the century. And once in a while, that battlefield gives us a wink and a laugh. And I think that happened here with this. It's really funny, I think, the rate of complaints that they received. On a serious note, though, again, how much of it is going to lead to a change in policy remains to be seen, because the bill got passed. Is he really going to suffer any consequences from these complaints electorally? Unlikely. Will the bill change? Unlikely. Often these bills, I'm not sure about the one in Scotland, but often they have parliamentary exemptions. So it's rules for thee and not for me. So, who knows how much actually will change? But in this moment, it is funny because you probably didn't see that coming.
And we'll be talking about what J.K. Rowling is doing to undermine this law with Douglas Murray. She is being, frankly, heroic. She's using herself to protect other women who may be charged for misgendering someone. Now, let's talk about billionaire Bill Gates. He was much celebrated for giving away parts of his fortune to help educate children. But what exactly is he teaching them? It appears his foundation funded a curriculum called A Pathway to equitable maths instruction, which tells educators they have a central role in deconstructing racism and mathematics and dismantling white supremacy in maths classrooms by making visible the toxic characteristics of white supremacy culture with respect to maths. What? Kosha, this lunacy might help explain why in the leftist utopia of Seattle, they are shutting down the gifted and talented program for being oversaturated with white and Asian students. This bizarre notion that maths is, I don't know, some sort of a white supremacist pursuit seems particularly idiotic. If you look at, I don't know, any VCE results, the best results seem to be from your Asian students when it comes to maths. I know it's a bit of a generalisation, but it's that stereotype exists for a reason.
It does exist for a reason. The thing with math is it is the most objective field, ultimately. It really is a universal language. It's the most objective metric. It doesn't mean that everybody has to be equally good at math, but it is the most objective arbiter of a certain level of IQ or way of navigating academics. And it's particularly disappointing, I think, coming from Bill Gates, because he is a poster child for somebody who was probably very good at math, very good at STEM, given his background in computer science and building Microsoft to what it is. So it feels a little bit disingenuous.
Is this why they're going after it? Because it is objective. You can't rewrite it with your preferred narrative. It's a right and a wrong. There's not much grey area.
I think so.
That's what's triggering them.
And then they don't like the results that come out of it, as you mentioned, with certain groups to seem to be better with it. And that's just the reality, and goes back to the Supreme Court case that we discussed and others that was penalizing Asian Americans and others, men that typically tend to do better at math on average. I think the other thing, too, is that there is a shortage of STEM teachers and math teachers in schools everywhere, and certainly in developed countries. And so this is another thing, instead of solving that issue and figuring out why that is, let's just sort of denigrate mathematics and take it out of the classroom or diminish it in the classroom. I think there's something there as well.
Yes, let's put the gender studies major in charge of maths. That's going to do well. Now, let's go to the polls in the US. Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in 6 of the 7 crucial swing states in the coming 2024 presidential election. In Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, North Carolina, Arizona, and Georgia, he is out in front by margins of up to 6 points. In Wisconsin, the two are tied. These are the battleground states that decided the 2016 and 2020 elections, and they're all turning red, according to these polls. But, Kosha, what's particularly astonishing is even in 2016, when he won, the polls weren't showing that before the election day. And in 2020, it looked like it was going to be a landslide, a bloodbath, but the result was much closer than the polls indicated. So we're seeing him leading by comfortable margins in some of these polls. What are the Democrats going to pull out of their hat to help fortify this election? How are they going to ensure there's not a second Donald Trump term?
You know, in an old-fashioned way or in a traditional way, this would look like an open and shut case that Biden's in trouble. If you look historically, since 1972, no president that had approval ratings below 45, he's been in the 30s, has ever won.
Yeah.
However, we're not in traditional times. I think that's a bygone era, unfortunately, and you've got all these twists and turns of lawfare against Trump. If he is to be convicted, which it looks like he will be in the New York case, that's the Stormy Daniels case, which nobody takes seriously, but the point is he'll have a label of being a convicted felon on him before Election Day, potentially. What is that going to do to the independents, the suburban moms who don't follow the news? Will that do something?
Well, that's their tactic, but I wonder if that's going to work, because all the lawfare has backfired thus far, but yet perhaps if there is an actual criminal conviction, that will...
Maybe, but it's never happened before, so we don't know. We're in uncharted territory. There's these third-party candidates that could be spoilers, and then there's the machinery, which the Democrats are very good at turning out the vote, much better than the Republicans, and so that's another thing.
Mail-in votes.
The mail-in votes, which has changed the way elections are done. So all of those things are where it goes, but if you just look on the issues and the approval rating, I think it's pretty black and white how the country feels.
Kosha Gator, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Pleasure.